Um, so, good evening, everybody, and live and also on the stream. I am Borna Petrani, I'm the Managing Director of Progressione, and this is a Social Art Practices Conference first panel session where we will focus on our region a little bit, in the Visegrad region, how we do social art practices here. Before I will go to our panelist, we have a fourth panelist who is not here physically due to the COVID situation, and we have a little bit of technical problem on the sense that it came out in the morning. So she will be there online. So anybody who is watching us via the Facebook link, you will be able to see her. And for the rest, my nice colleague Anna will read what she is meanwhile talking online. So we can change, and then we see Katalin from Slovakia.
And meanwhile, for the rest of the people who are here, I will just read out what.
So, hi and welcome everybody. My name is Katalin Kupiš and I'm from Slovakia, as Barno told. I'm an actor and drama teacher in Vekker Műhely, which is our organization. And I'm also the head of the organization, which is called Borigongo Symposium. And I'm really happy for getting the opportunity to introduce our work to you. So 8 years ago, when our organization Vekker Műhely was founded in 2013, our aim was to import theatre in education to Slovakia, as it did not exist in Slovakia at all at that time. Still, even nowadays, we are the only company that focuses on theatre and drama in education. So before we started our existence, we were attending TIE programs in Budapest as observers. And what we saw and what we experienced was absolutely different from the way that we were used to in terms of theatre performance, or the way that drama teachers were addressing or talking to the students. And we felt that this is what we wanted to do, and this is how we wanted to work with students and children. And soon we started devising our first program with the help of Káva Kulturális Műhely from Budapest. They helped us a lot during our work. And we strongly believe that theatre is an art form that can be applied for presenting topics and discussing them through TIE techniques. Later on, we have been experimenting with other art forms too. We have been applying dance or literature or fine arts in our programs. We have invited artists, different artists, dancers, writers, or painters to our programs, and we have been encouraging our audiences, our participators, to express themselves through the different art forms. Primarily, we work with students, primary or secondary school students, more precisely with classroom communities. This is really important for us, that we always work with certain communities. And through such programs, the participants get the possibility to get acquainted with different art forms or pieces of art. They exchange their thoughts or even enter into a debate on the given topic, such as bullying or the parent-child relationship and so on. Annually, we hold approximately 150 different programs on different venues. But why is it all necessary? Well, the Slovak school system, and I guess it might be a Central or Eastern European illness or virus. So the Slovak school system is quite an old-fashioned system where frontal teaching is the most widely used. You can imagine literature or music classes, which are mostly full of facts. The students have to memorize loads of data on artists or on their work, but they rarely get the opportunity to work on the interpretation of the different pieces of art or to express themselves through art. They rarely get the opportunity to talk or discuss during the classes. And through our programs, we want to introduce new and innovative teaching techniques and forms for teachers too. One of the challenges of our existence is being a minority organization focusing on Hungarian minority communities. Hungarian minority schools in Slovakia are mostly schools of small communities, and that is why we work as a so-called traveling theatre. We visit the schools, even the smallest ones, that would otherwise not have the possibility to experience such programs. So, however, it would be great to have our own space and to have an institution where we can guest communities and classes. This is not the case. That would help our audiences, and that's why we go to the different schools and hold our programs at their classrooms, for example. And at the end, what should I tell you about the future of our organization? Well, these days it is really difficult to make plans, but based on the feedback of the teachers and students in this post-COVID situations, such social art practices are even more needed than before. So we are trying to do our best to continue the work that has been on so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then we are jumping back in live. And I assume you met now, but you didn't know each other. I know all of you. And just a little bit of background, that Progressione is running a few socially engaged projects, also one academy which is ending tomorrow. And that's why we thought that this is a good idea to focus a little bit and see what else is going on in our region. And I think I will ask each of you for a little bit of presentation on what you are doing in your home country, how is it related to social art practices. And then I also planned a few questions together with Anna, which I saved for myself. But I would also like to ask the audience, both here and also you can chat it online, and then we will somehow manage to bring the question from the online version to our table, so that it becomes more of a conversation. And of course, I also welcome you to react on each other. But first, I would like to ask you, Małgorzata, to present yourself a little bit.
Hello, my name is Małgorzata Miśnienkiewicz. I'm an art historian and a curator, and I'm here representing Art Transparent Foundation. Art Transparent is an NGO based in Wrocław, so Southwest Poland, which specializes. For years been doing projects in arts and public space, art education, and the biggest project that's been running on for almost 2 decades. Next year is our 20th anniversary. Is Survival Survival Art Review, which is you can say contemporary art show, but it's not just that. It's happening every year in a different abandoned or desolate or inaccessible building. So every year it's a different location. The theme of the works respond to the location, its identity. There is open call, and there are curatorial selections. So every year we take over some amazing pieces of forgotten architecture in Wrocław, make it open to public, turn it into space for art, space for social experimentation, and that happens every year. Next year it's last weekend of June, so you're all welcome to join us. But this is one of the longest running projects that the foundation does. Another important aspect has been work in public spaces. Part of it took many years ago in more typical form of, for example, murals with like concrete poetry and these sorts of interventions. Recently, we've done a much more ephemeral interventions in the public space. So I think the last one that's very dear to my heart because it took a lot of tears and sweat, but it did happen, was within the realm of the project Artifake, which was cooperation between organizations from Armenia, Ukraine, and Poland, dealing with questions of fake news and propaganda. And to go back to what you said about different characteristics of the region, it was already quite interesting to see different thinking about public space and how art can be socially engaged while being still COVID proof. So because this is a big part of how do you do work in public while actually trying not to infect people. So in Armenia and in Ukraine, they were very much focused on murals still, and the works that they produced were very much in the context of military conflict. So it was Donbass, it was Eastern Ukraine, it was recent conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And for them, the framework to speak about propaganda was very much the military hybrid war context. For us, it was not that. So the works that we produced, there were three. I can mention them briefly to show you different aspects how we think about working in public space. So Alicja Patanowska and Marcin Sawiński, they produced a printer that is a mobile object that we would put in public spaces in libraries. There is a whole educational program around it that prints fake news in real time. So there are computers sourcing data from all the fact-checking organizations, and they immediately print it, and then they print the explanation why it's a fake news. So kind of verifying them as they happen. And it takes a transparent plexiglass cube that you can put in different places. And it worked incredibly. It's not very ecological, obviously, but the sheer volume of the material was had very strong visual impact, and for many people, without being typically socially engaged art, in a sense, interacting directly with particular community, it did become a good departure point for other educational activities and workshops that we did around that. Another big part were games, the things like educational materials that were then related to the works and given to people to kind of educate themselves and their kids. Another work was Paweł Kuczyński's sound installation that was it was kind of like acupuncture work, because it was a sound installation happening by the river, and it sort of popped up and disappeared. So it was directed to a very particular audience, people hanging out, just drinking beer, kind of relaxed area in Wrocław. And then it wasn't supposed to be very much there. It was just it was some weird, absurd sentences, some very grotesque, some kind of what did that happen? Was it true? So it was very much about kind of breaking through the conversations that were happening there with small signals. And the third one, that's the serious one, and was Liliana Piskorska's work. The summer has come completely, and if any of you know Wrocław, there is a UNESCO heritage site with Centennial Hall. It was built in 1913, so anniversary of the Battle of Lipsk, it was German. And then in 1948, something that's called Iglita, so a spire was added to be bigger and kind of new Polish addition to that, and it was a very strong symbolically charged place. And what Liliana did with this 96 meters tall spire, she decided to turn it into a maple, so the sort of in the horror Midsummer, traditional kind of folk. So we did that, and there were these 30 meters or 50 meters long threads of cloth that they would respond. It was a week-long performative action and intervention. So every thread was about one particular story. So these were women and non-binary people who were tackled by fake news and propaganda. And every day we would have rituals there that were also streamed, and the whole thing was about kind of creating, turning the spire into sort of antenna for care and caring and protection, and kind of trying to undo the harm that was done by fake news and propaganda. Sorry, I talked way too much, but just just to tell you our understanding of how art can function in a public space, whereas it's not. There were several projects that were very much created in with particular community. So like Carolina Brekua's TV series. But even when we work in a public space, we're trying to angle it to particular audience and to particular questions and see how we can actually come with the message or what we're trying to say so that it fits the context that we're trying to speak about. Berta.
Hi everyone, thank you Barna for inviting me here. I am Hussam Abed, a theatre director, puppeteer, a musician and producer. I organize Living Festival in Czech Republic. Our theatre is organizing it since 2019. It started in our living room actually, where we invited puppeteers in the weekend to perform, and there were some musicians. We have jam session, we have food sharing and talks, film screening. Then the idea, we expanded into 5 different flats in Prague, in the city of Prague, where we make kind of open call. We ask friends or friends of friends or anyone who would love to host. And people generously opened their houses, and they were kind enough to offer food and drinks. And also the audience were bringing also food and drinks. So it was really playing on the idea of breaking who's a spectator, who's performer. Because we have shared the space where each one is really sharing freely. So basically we have been doing a lot of projects before COVID, after COVID. And before COVID, there are the main projects. Let's say we had a tour in Visegrad countries, cultural summer in the middle of nowhere, we call it, where we have been touring with a collective of artists to Visegrad countries, including Romania also, working with children, with youth, doing some performances, workshops, different kind of workshops also, between dance and music, puppetry. And also we had the Living Festival, what I mentioned now. Besides that, we initiated the Theatre Lab in 2019 in Jordan to work with refugee communities and local people as a self-expression communication platform, and it was initiated in collaboration with DAMO, the Academy of Performing Arts in Prague. So basically we have these projects as main activities beside our own productions, which is also non-conventional kind of puppet theater performances, where we try all the time to explore what's performance, what's theater, what's reality. So most of the time we do performances in non-conventional spaces, like in a kitchen or a living room, where we also have the food as a strong element in our work. And after COVID or post-COVID, let's say, like we tried to work online. So we initiated also one project called Objects Without Borders, where we collaborated with visual artists and calligraphy artists based in UK, with another 2 theaters from UK and 1 theater from Jordan, and we were from Czech Republic. And we tried to explore how we could really express through this Zoom and the camera, and the initial thing for the storytelling would be the calligraphy or our initials actually. So it was nice exploration, and now we are trying to develop this further to reach the community and see how we can involve more people in this. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I just wanted to ask you, Fanny, to continue.
Hi, my name is Fanny Haidu. I'm a facilitator, actor, drama teacher, and what else? yeah, I would say these are the main things. And it's a tricky question about the organization because I'm freelance, so I'm not directly related to any organizations right now. But I'm a co-founder of a drama pedagogy collective called Ciao, with whom we are working with underprivileged youngsters and children, mainly with children living in a temporary housing system, with or without their families, depending on their backgrounds. And I'm also the artistic leader of two of Progressione's projects, Academy Plus and Academy for Actors of Civil Change, of which we have two amazing participants sitting in the audience. And the last one, Academy for Actors of Civil Change, is a program that's going on for years now. This is the fourth time that I'm related somehow with it, becoming from project manager to artistic leader, team member. And it is going on right now. This is the last, the last evening before the last day of the program. And this program is inviting participants from 8 different countries, all of them working with or aiming to work with underprivileged people, not necessarily youth, also adults sometimes. And all of the facilitators coming from the different countries to hold workshops are working with different artistic methods. So these are the methods that we are trying to somehow share with the participants, also ready for their contributions and the things that they are sharing with us. And this year is very special in this regard because in Academy Plus, in this other project, we are trying to merge different methodologies in order to be able to create a real process, not just to give different workshops, but to make them live a whole experience that is in some way making our own methodologies to become a whole. So this is right now an experimental phase. It's very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all of you, and I think that there will be already a few questions, but before jumping into that, I have a regional specific question to you. I always feel all of us are very experienced also in international projects, but whenever I go to bigger conferences, I usually, find the ones coming from our region. So there is some kind of a similarity, but I'm very much interested, how do you feel the acceptance of social art practices, working with the community in your country compared to what you see elsewhere? Also, if we also do sometimes international projects where international artists are coming with a very different expectation concerning how the community will react. And I also think that there is a little bit of historical implication on that, like how much these communities are open for art and how much we can involve them. But do you have any? So what do you see in your national context on that?
I think there are several things that play into, like, I can't say there's one, like, historical or nationalistic way to be socially engaged art, of course not. I think there are several aspects to it, many of which come from the logistics and infrastructure. So the funding and sustainability of the project is a big thing. In Poland, most of the funding comes from the state, and you always have to finish it in most cases by December, and in March. So you have like 6 months to produce a sustainable, socially engaged practice. It's not feasible to actually create a working community. So I think the aspect of organization and actually being able to learn from the community and with the community or a particular group is quite challenged by that. Of course, there are different ways, but I think many artists struggle with that, and many artists struggle with the ones I talk to with the question of responsibility that follows from that. That if you have to abruptly end, then how do you relate to the people you've been working with? Like, how do you communicate? How do you continue? So that's one of the big aspects. When it comes to particular, I think it isn't necessarily about the country specificity, but it can be about neighborhood specificity. So, in which area with whom are you trying to work? If you're coming to, there was Michał Bieniek from the Transparent Foundation. He curated and oversaw this great project a few years ago during European Capital of Culture. It was the entrance through the courtyard, where particular artists would spend actually quite a long time developing relationships with inhabitants of one courtyard, and then they would get to know them, work with them, and whatever their practice was, they would come up with some sort of things to happen. And one of them was Karolina Breguła, who made a TV series. She's a filmmaker, so she did a TV series, like 6 episodes with the inhabitants of this courtyard, and they were super proud, and they were TV stars. It was amazing. But another example is, for example, Iza Rutkowska, who made this huge hedgehog sculpture situation that still keeps on going, and that's amazing because she keeps on working with this particular community, and the community it morphed into something else. But they keep on creating together and working together. So these are just some examples on top of my head from this particular project that I think had a very good hook in terms of working with people who don't even if they don't necessarily know all of them each other, they see each other every day, right? So this is like the kind of it's more I think it's more demanding from the artist to actually enter and convince everyone, but or some people to participate. But then I think it's more sustainable because they're all there, and it doesn't take traveling to the other side of town to participate in a workshop or something like that. So maybe not necessarily a country, but sort of which community you're working with. I think it's very different if you're in a sort of working class neighborhood where people see each other and are there every day, or if you go to kind of new build expensive apartments where people work 16 hours a day in corporate offices. And it's like whom you're working with. I think that's a bigger question rather than which country. So yeah, there was something else.
I clarify a little bit what I meant with the historical impact. I didn't meant in the 19th century. I meant the recent history, also concerning a little bit that how to go. So for in the socialist times, there was kind of a focus on that, and then now 30 years ago, it stopped fully. So it changed. It changed totally, and I think that there is still kind of impact of that.
Yeah, actually, I can add on one thing. There is last year we did a survival review in Pafawak, which was like the Linke Hoffmann before the war. So it's like a huge train and carriages factory, and there were like thousands of people working there. And the most amazing thing was that we found was that they staged an opera. And they actually did. There came opera director in the 50s, and they staged an opera with all the workers there, and we were like, "Wow, that's amazing!" And then Eva found one of the curators who's very good with like research and history. She found some documents that when they weren't super happy about it because they had to stay after hours to practice this bloody opera that they were supposed to do. But definitely, but then there were more and more documents that talked about the importance of like cultural activities in the workplace, and that was like part of the entire thing. So it was completely normal that they would have choirs or workshops for painting and stuff like that. So it was part of working life and part of kind of state-sanctioned cultural participation, so to say, which of course after 1989 was completely gone, and then it was left to artists and NGOs to kind of fill that void.
That was a top-bottom approach.
Yeah, I feel it has 2 levels. Like if we speak about institutions, or if we speak about, let's say, in Czech Republic, it's so common now, the phenomena of family houses transform into cultural spaces. And there are many friends who are starting to run this, like Carolina Placha in her house, and they took an old house with a barn, and the barn became a theater space, community gathering, they do workshops there. And also Daniela Gruhova, both of them graduate from Damu. Daniela Gruhova, in her small village, she involved all the community. So all the people suddenly carrying either fish or doing something, they make a street parade with everybody in the village responding to one theme. So every time they are having, this year maybe it was mushroom, I think. So all the city become mushroom, or the village, and they literally go everywhere. So it can be in the pub, under the bridge, under the tree, above the tree, everywhere. And all the program respond to this. On the other hand, if we speak about institutions, it's totally also different approach of how they involve the community. Mainly, there is this trend of documentary theater, I would say, which is also based many times on real stories of real people, like busking, for example, phenomena in Czech Republic, in Prague. You can see real musicians you can meet in the streets of Prague in a theater performance, in Archa Theater, for example. And so the examples, it goes in this direction, and I agree with you. It's not about actually country, more than actually this division between how much these people can be really into art and culture, or if it's a working class like this town where I live now, it has the biggest factor, Lego factory is there, 57 million per month income. And the working class, so most of the people are really busy with their work, so few people are really interested to come to see. And to make people involved more in art and culture is really a big challenge. So it comes mostly into maybe activities that can combine, let's say, food with cultural events. Like to say there will be barbecue, and if you would like to watch a film, then you could see there are more than 30 people in the event. So it depends really on I would say, on the place, and on the readiness of community to be involved in such activities. Yeah.
Just one question concerning you mentioned the food a few times. Yeah. Are you hungry? No, I'm joking. But how did it started, or how did it's because I think it's a nice tool. I really like this idea also if you're going into the living spaces of people. But where did it came from in your practice?
In more practice, actually, I have a theater piece where I cook during performance. And this is like in 2014, I had the premiere. And it's for 8 spectators. So mainly I was asking any venues, any festivals, please, if it's possible to do it in a living room or in a kitchen, it would be really great. If it's not possible, it's fine. We can do it anywhere. So the idea came from here. But I would say that in Czech Republic especially, I find that food is really a very strong element when it comes to work with community. I know from Archa Theater experience, for example. Archa Theater is let's call it an alternative space theater, where they work with refugees and migrants. And as I know, because when I arrived to Czech Republic, I work with All Stars Refugee Band. I had one concert with them. I was performing with them. And I realized that all of them, in the beginning, they didn't know the language, actually. They didn't know how to communicate. And the way how to make them involved was by making soup and cigarettes. So they were offering these people who are living in that detention center some soup and cigarettes. Then musical instruments came and they established the band, let's call it. So food is very strong in how to break somehow what's not possible of communication, let's call it. It can really be a good tool. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Funny on the original.
May I ask you to repeat your question just to be sure
I
to...
will try. So what is the specificity which you feel in Hungary compared to other countries working with communities, taking in consideration the historical background when we are talking not about the 19th century's historical background, but mostly about the communist time, and there was this top-down approach towards building communities around culture, and then it's suddenly disappeared, but there are still traces of it.
Thank you. I was just so caught by everything that you said that I wasn't sure about the question anymore. I can actually still feel the influence of the socialist era and this top-bottom sort of approach of culture makers or cultural institutions, but also of individuals in this regard, because a lot of times I experience a distrust or sort of a fear from the side of the people with whom we intend to work when we are doing social art practices, and oftentimes it comes from us not being on the same level in some regards. Sometimes it's because we are not coming from the same community, from the same background. It can be social background, or that they are coming from a minority and we are not. And it's very, very hard to create links. But also I feel like there's, in Hungary, there's an approach towards social art practices that the people who are using them are actors of a lower level. So from the theater and the cultural scenes, a lot of times people who are working with underprivileged communities are seen as people who did not achieve their goals, so they had to choose something else to do because they didn't manage what their original aim was. And and there's also the part that I feel like social art practices are quite invisible in Hungary, and now they are getting more and more visibility. But as it's a work that is really working on the roots and in the countryside and in places that are less visible, and the people who are doing the work are busy in the communities, they also don't really have the time or the tools to be able to give a representation to it. So, yes, this is my not very positive opinion in this.
Does it mean that, and I will ask all of you in that sense, but for you, Fanny, that's the biggest challenge you are facing, working with the community, to have the representation in that sense, or is it the building the relationship and with the community? And I will ask also you that what is the biggest challenge working on socially engaged arts?
Very quickly.
I think I agree with her. Like, it's more about really building the relation, that people know what's this actually. And it comes the trust after. Because most of the time, let me put it like this, I've been doing some theater workshops in the neighborhood where I live with young people who never did theater. And for most of them, they don't know what is it. So when it comes to practice it, and they realize that it has some value, let's call it, then it can change how they perceive it. The same thing for their parents, the same thing for the people around. And for me, this is maybe the most interesting way of how to make public engagement, how to invite people not to be just as a passive, but really as like let's do together. Like not in the meaning of it's participatory. Yeah.
Just two things came to my mind. One of them is that, I miss the representation as a tool that could make our work easier, because representation also means that the institutions and the ones who may provide funding are paying attention to the use of social work practices. And as far as it's not represented, it also means that it's not funded. So, as you said, Margareta, we have to create sustainability in some ways, but it's really, really hard to create it if we always have to apply for different fundings for different projects and just be somehow lost in the process of trying to fund our own work and at the same time also do it and work for it to be represented. So it's just like a vicious circle, and you have to take on different roles at the same time, which is like even the role itself, like one role itself, is quite demanding. Another thing that came to my mind about what you said was that, these communities are oftentimes not very familiar with what we are doing, but I think that it also depends on the terms that we are using or just the approach or how we go into their communities and what we offer. I was working a couple of years ago at In the House Hungary, which is it's an organization that's been founded 5 years ago, I think. Around that, they just had a birthday quite recently, and social workers funded it in their university years. They went to a small settlement in the Borsod part of Hungary, which is a quite poor neighborhood with a lot of Roma minorities, and they set up an after-school system to help children study and to help them also to continue their studies and not to continue the paths of their families. And they are very, very successful in their work. But the story goes this. So I go there with my small organization, Ciao, and we'd like to hold a drama workshop for the children. And they tell us that, games, we don't do games. Games are for children, like, come on. And so we asked them, okay, what do you like to do? And they said that they like to quarrel. I was like, okay, how you do that? And basically, they set up a situation in which they were quarreling over who is more important or valuable, women or men. I was like, oh my god, I love this. This is perfect. Let's do this. So we set up a sort of a debate theater situation when one opinion was on one part of the room and the other opinion on the other part, and the two parts had to debate and convince each other. And then we also posed some situations to them on which they could react. And it was a super interesting thing. That was the use of a drama tool in something that they are actually using or doing and having fun with. So I think a lot of times it depends on our own representation as well.
I think maybe because I'm coming from the visual arts perspective, I think there is a big difference there, or at least some. See, when you talked about representation, I immediately thought about visibility, and visibility is for me a big problem when it comes to social practices, because it's a question of whose visibility and for whose gaze. And when I think in visual art, social art practices are very much the hype, and everyone wants to do it. And the problem is that it becomes much more about the artist being the good social worker rather than him or her doing the work that actually benefits or creates some sort of actually systemic change or some sort of societal change, anything. So when you talked about institutions recognizing, I think that's another big thing from the visual arts perspective. Like when you put social art practices to the museum, like what is going on? What are we doing? So the institutional framework that stands behind social art practices, like I think it's a big thing when it comes to visual art. But for me, the biggest problem is actually the visibility. And who is to appreciate it, who is to look at it? Is there really an audience? Like, should there be a secondary audience to social art practices? And then what's the role of the artist? Because there's artists as activists, there's artists as catalysts, there's artists as so many things. But if there is artists as artists who want to show their work within the museums, the work that's supposedly is to work with the community and about and on and in the community. So when you talked about representation, to me the question of visibility, that is one step further. It's like a big question mark how to deal with that.
Just quickly react on that one, because we work together with Ludwig Museum, which is the contemporary art museum in Hungary, and they were lucky to have an international project which they totally don't understood at the beginning. Like, that's about community art, what that is, and but it was described in the application. It was an EU application. They have to have an exhibition, and we talked a lot with the director, and she was super unhappy with it. She was very doubtful. Like, why do we do that? It doesn't make any sense. And then they selected, I think, 7 or 8 artist groups. And they created an exhibition called Közös Ügyeink, Our Common Things, and it was far the most successful exhibition of the museum. And they also could much more organize, even with this attitude at the beginning that I don't like, what is this? Why do we do that? Okay, it's an EU program. We don't do any more EU programs. It's craziness. And even with this attitude at the very beginning, they were able to organize much more workshops around it than in any other exhibition of theirs. And ever since, there is an interest in the Ludwig Museum that we have to do community art practices, because that was so much successful.
Engagement, many different forms of engagement with an institution, I'm completely fine. I'm talking about the sort of transplantation of social engaged project that is working with particular community on something very ephemeral, very transient, not necessarily producing an object. Because, if the project is, let's make a TV series, fine, everyone knows what they're doing. But if it is about process, it's about, rebuilding relationships, and the kind of art object is like a tool to achieve that, then, how do you translate it into kind of institutional, like ultimately market framework?
There was a lot of projects which were really about the process, and it was still exhibited in a very interesting way at the end.
But I think there are 2 directions, at least. Like in Czech Republic, you can see them clearly when it comes to focusing either on the process or really the process and the outcome when you work with the community. As applied theater, like theater for social change, you can find these two ways of doing, let's call it. There is a strong, for example, theater of the oppressed, strong wave of theater of the oppressed, but on the other hand, I would call it like it's poor theater as a result, as an outcome. It's good for the people who are doing it more than for the public to watch, and it's a matter of really choice in the end. And I'm interested in how to actually work before the process. Like, what kind of activities can we do as artists and make the people really interested and involved? And is it all the time needed to do theater? As a theater maker, I'm now thinking, is it needed just, is it nostalgic that we like theater, so everybody should do theater? Maybe it's not needed, actually. So it's a question of what the community can bring to the process, what kind of tools they can have. Because for me, theater is it can be anything, actually. It's not about just performing. It can be anything, theater. Yeah.
Just a little glimpse back to visibility. It's also a big challenge that each time when something is visible about social art practices, there's this other regard, this misregard of, oh, this person or this institution or group is just doing this work because they want to get something from the hype, because they want to be seen as good people. you know. So when an artist goes to a different community than his own, then there comes also this part. And I feel the same about visual arts and fine arts, that when there's an exhibition that is socially engaged, there are always people saying that, okay, but this is too much, this is not the way it should be exhibited, maybe it shouldn't even be exhibited. And a lot of times the question is, all right, but what's the way? Or what's more important? Is it more important to do it in the right way that no one really knows what is? Or the importance is in the doing?
I would say a balance. To find a balance, because sometimes really the outcome can have really big impact and inspiring for bring a lot of inspiration for participants. For me, I did when I was in the theater lab idea. We had one participant in Veldgale and who never did theater. Her family doesn't want her to sing, and she took a challenge and she wanted to try. And she got a grant to do like through Erasmus to in the 4 countries, in Hungary, in Slovakia, in Poland, in Czech Republic, to attend Master of Puppetry, because she loved the final product was great, final result, let's say, and the process. So I would say both. If there is a possibility of making balance, then it's a great way of like empowering the community.
For me, it's more of a question of transparency and actually agreeing on what we're doing. And I understand that many things are processed and that they don't know where they're going to lead, but sort of check in between. And it was, I've heard, but I'm lucky to say that I haven't curated these. That's it. I haven't had the situation in my practice, but I've heard about several projects where the community was fed up with the artist and then felt cheated or felt used for the creation of a big work and then was sold for a lot of money to an institution and they got nothing. And I'm not saying that artists should not benefit from their work, absolutely not. But you have to set the rules very clearly with the people you're working with and treat them as partners, not as a medium or, you know.
I think that these good examples are also helping a lot, and it comes in my mind. I think it was 6-7 years ago. I used to work a lot in contemporary dance. We had a partner from Austria, and he started to do in little villages this community-based dance. And there is a very nice story that they were elderly people. So there came a dancer in her 70, she was like 75, so someone came to dance. And she was a bookkeeper and she retired. And she was very good in the community dance at that age. And then Liz put her in a professional performance also, so performing on big stages. And they were in a lot of international projects. And then some of their friends saw them and they invited her to make performance or creation in Italy. And then she came back crying to Liz, like, she doesn't know what the life is doing with her, because she wanted to be a dancer at 16. And then somehow all her career paths broke, and then she became a bookkeeper. She lived like this for 50 years. She was always dreaming about it, and now suddenly she never expected that 75 she will be basically an international dance star, touring with different companies. I wanted to ask you a little bit about still taking to the institutional questions, also because in Hungary, also from the EU and also in some other works that we do, we try to work together with schools, and it's getting harder and harder because the institutions are not, they are not very open-minded, or they are afraid because they are under other institutions. And do you have the same obstacles? And if yes, then how do you deal with it? I think it's quite.
We haven't done much work with schools. We do projects for little baby artwork, so actually for young parents. And for seniors, we did some projects for kids and youth, as in games like educational materials instead. But we even had this conversation last week. We were discussing plans for next year, that we actually don't want to work in schools. because the schools are undergoing their own transformations in line with the current political life in Poland. Teachers are more and more terrified. We don't want to do this sort of line of storytelling, let's say, that the government proposes. And we kind of decided that we will just offer an alternative and do it like on our own terms without doing that, without struggling with all the institutional and all the logistics and all of that problem. And also, I kind of understand this perspective also, that I don't think it's our job. Like, we don't have to do everything, we don't have to be visible everywhere, and I think it's important to kind of set your bounds, like, we don't have to, socially engage every kid from 10 to 13 in this district in Wrocław. Like, it's impossible, we can't do it, and we have to think about what we are capable to do, and
Yeah, for us, actually, we are collaborating with Inbazi, which is a Czech NGO, started as a storytelling project by one Czech photographer who was going to war zones, and she was just really taking photos and making storytelling, collecting stories. Then it developed into more legal consultation. They help migrants in Czech Republic, and they have a school program where we are contributing to some program in the schools. But it's again the question of if they are interested about representation, how we are really reaching the school. So until now we have 2 presentations in school, and exactly as you said, like maybe it's not our area, maybe we don't need to focus on this. The thing that we do now, collaborate with this community center. It's just in the neighborhood where we are, in the same street where I'm living with my Hungarian wife and little 3 years daughter. And during COVID time, thanks to COVID, sorry to say it like this, but this building, it's like family house from 19th century. As a result for COVID, they started to do cultural events without permission. In the time of saying it's not allowed to do anything, they wanted to break and to do something. So they were doing film screenings, music concerts, and it get to the level that they started even homeschooling and kindergarten because they didn't want children to wear masks. And this is bring me back to what you were saying about communism time. Because for many people now, like at least in this neighborhood, there is really community who are totally against all regulations, all this military style of how to control virus, and they are trying to bring in light, let's call it, or more freedom of choice, let's call it, that I would like to be or not vaccinated or whatever call it, wearing mask or not. So they started this homeschooling idea, which is for me, yeah, I'm doing theater there. No institutions, no regulations. It's like no bureaucracy somehow. And yeah, maybe it's not needed to go everywhere, but to find maybe the people that we can connect with and we can share. Yeah.
Well, it is my job to go to schools with drama in education, theater in education. And yeah, as Barna said, it's becoming more and more of a struggle. Of course, COVID doesn't help in anything. But yeah, it's just I have a lot of conversations with colleagues and peer professionals about this. Like, we all share this struggle on how to formulate our thoughts and our intentions when we decide about the play or about the workshop that we are wanting to hold, because we are looking at the needs, the intentions of the groups, let it be an age group or a more specific community, and then we have to formulate it in a different way when we'd like to get some funding. So we are writing applications, and we are writing applications for the national funds to give us money, which is like public money and actually lottery money. So it's normally not even in line with government or political issues, but still the people deciding are part of the governing system. And then we again have to reformulate them when we reach out to schools or teachers and somehow try to figure out what will be good for them, for the teacher who is open enough and who wants their class to have an experience which is not in line with the directives of the political era, but also with the director of the school, who is probably threatened, if not yet a puppet of the government. So it's a very, very hard dance, or like a walk on the ropes that we are doing at each times. And yeah, I have really no clue how to make it differently, because at the same time I feel like it's very important to go to schools and to also provide something in those places which is kind of against the system, or against what is being taught to these children. Because in Hungary right now the whole climate is very anti everything, anti, I don't know, like it's homophobic, it's racist, it's anti-Semitist a lot of times. It's very, very important to also give a representation of the opposite in these institutions, at least for me.
I have a very last question from my side, and then I would ask the audience to have questions. But I still would like to ask you how. What do you think? How is the COVID situation influencing the work that you are doing? What was the difference that you have done? And I'm especially interested in things which you learned in the COVID, working with communities, and which you would like to bring on. So that what you basically learned, and oh well, that's a practice which we should have started before, and thanks to COVID, it's nice to highlight a few positive impacts of COVID also, in that sense that we learn new methodologies, if there are any.
If we are to talk about positive things, I'm going to give ourselves like a big pat on the back, because the great thing, a very kind of pleasant for us thing that happened was something that wasn't pleasant to our viewers, because there were queues. And people were amazing, because people spent hours queuing to see exhibition. We actually did the exhibition physically, with the restriction. And 2 years as we're in this pandemic, like I'm in awe of the audience who is willing to spend 2 hours waiting to see exhibition. And for me and for many people who are in the are producing area, it's such a boost, it gives you so much faith that it makes sense what we're doing, because actually people are coming, and they're not angry, they're just patient. It's completely amazing. So that's the good thing. I think for me personally, I work a lot with video, and I've spent a lot of lockdown in front of my screen, and I really started to appreciate object and texture, and actually, actually being in the presence of art, kind of actually creating those spaces for viewing, for contemplation, to actually get together. That I think art, as how we talked about, the death of institutions and death of White Cube. I'm just like, no, we need all these spaces. We need the containers where we can meet. And so for me, that was one of the biggest takeaways. Another thing is, I think, the facility to organize things. I think the sort of the big Zoom lesson that we collectively went through kind of changed thinking in terms of possibilities of cooperation. How do we start dialogues? How do we start working together? Because it used to be just traveling and trying to get people together. Now all of a sudden it is possible to have a conversation. Between us, we were so masterfully organizing them. But I think that this is something that's opening up also new possibilities for cooperation for artists and audiences, like reaching different people. That's my two takeaways.
Yeah, for me, it's there was one project. It's exactly what you were saying about video, because it pushed me also to think about video, about camera, about Zoom, about I don't know. So there were two projects which were done during COVID time. One of them was with Divadlo Putin in Slovakia, an art camp on Zoom, which used to be done actually. We did it in 2019. We were invited also to. We were partnered with Divadlo Putin, and it's an art camp where the participants get different mediums of artistic mediums, and they have all the freedom to experiment and to explore and to see what's the possibilities. So we were working mainly with objects, materials with them, but this was transformed into, let's say, try to explore alone in your living room what you can do with household, with artifacts, with anything you find in your living room, in your kitchen, and try to explore any materials that you have around. So it took this shape. It was called In Memoriam, and when it was initiated, it was initiated because of the murder of Jan Kuciak, the journalist. So it was about freedom of speech. And we were able to do it actually by going there and be in the space with the participants. But because of COVID, we had to change our tools somehow, or to find the ways how to do it online. It was a big challenge. Yeah. The second project, which was done with Beth Spa University, where I do my PhD now, and with Theatre Orchard from UK and Wattle and Daub puppet theatre based in Bristol, with Scenario, an UK organization based in Jordan, where we bring also artists, art practitioners, calligraphy artists. He was with us. And we were trying, this is what I mentioned before, that we were trying to explore what's the possibilities of using our bodies, of using objects as a starting point for visual storytelling via Zoom, via camera, etc. And the main idea to develop this project into bigger project, which would be open for or involving more people and more artists who are interested in this. And the third advantage was that I was able to stay in one place and produce more. So I developed two performances, one for children, one for adults. And yeah, I have time to spend with my family. Yeah, so it was good. The advantage of PhD actually it started also during COVID because I'm sitting at home. Yeah. And my partner, who is also co-running the Papa Theatre with me, Rika Dayak, she also started her PhD, which is focusing on the family houses, how to transform family houses into cultural spaces. And basically, she's focusing on 5-6 places in Czech Republic, which has this element in how they work with the community, how they involve the community with their work. Yeah. That's it.
For me, the beauty or a very nice learning of the COVID and the Zoom times was the solidarity. The solidarity between professionals and also between me and my target groups. Because it was very, very challenging to work with kids who do not have the proper circumstances, neither technologically or in the environment, because they are living in one room with their whole family. So I could see everything that's going on around them, like their siblings climbing up on them and parents in underwear walking around in the background, or the quarrels or everything. But it was really helping for them to live this 1 hour per week together, to see their peers. And a lot of times we weren't doing what I was planning to do with them, of course, because the necessity was rather to have this moment together and the psychological support. And it was also helping for me to understand a little bit more their situations and to really feel myself in their shoes. And also, I have been living some beautiful moments thanks to the Zoom, which is something that I did not expect at all, because I feel like there's this energy that theater and the community of people brings into the soul that is, well, I thought was like unbelievable that it could happen in another way. But I did have experiences like that when we did something together on Zoom, and you were just having all the people in their little windows, in their little realities next to you, and you could have this experience of community still in COVID times.
And is it a methodology which you try to continue?
No. No, actually, I still have, for instance, about the academy that we are doing. We did an online conference last year, so we tried to do something even in the COVID times, because we felt that it was really necessary also for us professionals to keep on working and to speak about our challenges, but also to share methods or tools that we are using and to support each other mentally. And it was an amazing experience and very, very enriching and supporting. But at the same time, when I think about the academy, I still cannot picture it in an online format. And I don't know, I mean, I can see them nodding. Because there's just something that has to be experienced also in a way that, when you go to a certain country and you stay there and you live together for 2 weeks and you have all this time dedicated to a certain activity and to a certain community living, you live it completely differently when you have the designated hours, and at the same time you're also taking care of your other chores and taking care of yourself and feeding yourself, and it's completely different. I feel it because now this is the first year when we are doing the academy in Budapest, and I have to walk my dog, and there are just these things that you cannot really avoid, and there are people not understanding that when it's the academy, it's the academy. Like, I don't have a life, but it's the academy. So I feel like it really depends on your headspace and on your dedication. But those moments when we are present in the same room, that also holds a certain kind of dedication. And I can see my participants supporting me in that. So, yeah, that's it.
And then I would like to open a little bit a circle. So if there are any questions coming from the audience, it could be also for the beginning, also around the work of the panelists, what they presented at the beginning. Anna?
I'm happy to start. Thank you so much for the whole talk and coming here. And one question that came into my mind, all of you are, this is the nature of social art practices in general, that all of your practices are hovering between art and social work and activism, and you're all saying that within multiple worlds and roles. And my question is, and usually this is my question when I'm looking at socially engaged art, or sometimes it is, that how do you navigate ethically within these worlds? Because often what I see is that artists with the best of intentions go into seriously underprivileged environments where there are lots of social problems, which I personally think that sometimes they go in naively saying that art will solve everything, which obviously with problems like housing, and feeding your children and these kind of problems, art won't solve it. And I often see, or I feel often that they go in unprepared, or without social workers. Many of you mentioned also working with NGOs, but I was just wondering, like, in your own practices, what can be techniques for doing cultural work and art practices, but staying within, like ethical boundaries of what you can and what you can't do, also connected to, for example, visibility. So I was wondering if you could share with us.
For whom? For everyone?
Yeah, I think all of you.
Yeah, actually, you mentioned something. I think for me personally, it's more like how to be transparent with the community, how to sit from the very beginning, before the start even, that what's this actually, and why we are doing it, and how to make them really co-workers, call them whatever you want, that it's not just a material of work for me as an artist. I'm the artist who know everything, and I'm coming now to, for me, I learn more than participants usually in anything I do. And it's clear that many times, because I work a lot on documentary theater, and naively saying now to you, I work in Europe with refugee communities, and I was saying, coming from refugee background, me myself, and I did a performance about my childhood in a refugee camp. I thought that this is a strong way of communication, because for me it's not about, I'm bringing a new narrative in my work, and this is why I do actually documentary theater, is about rewriting history and finding a new narrative and tricking our memory. This is how I do documentary theater. But for me, I was thinking also that maybe everybody should do the same, because this is a strong tool. And I would tell you that it's not all the time the same. There were two participants who crashed in the process, crashed totally, yeah? From Afghanistan, because they really touched death, both of them. One of them was, his father was killed by Taliban. He escaped to his uncle, and his uncle turned to be Taliban. And they put explosive belt and go explode yourself. So for me, this is not the narrative I wanted actually, but he shared this during the process. And we said, okay, this is between us. It's not something to share with others if you don't feel comfortable. So it's also about really finding these moments of honesty and being really truthful to ourselves, that it's not like everybody is material to work on. I don't want, and it's not about everybody should do theater. It's not about everyone should share their own stories. If it's possible from the very beginning to set these rules and to say to which direction we would like to go, and to give the freedom of choice, and then it's from ethical point of view, I would not feel that I'm misusing these people to my own agenda, or whatever call it, or the NGO agenda. Because for me, I don't even follow rules of agenda of NGOs when I work with NGOs. For me, I come, okay, you have your own way of work, but I don't have to use it, because I don't know these participants and what they will bring to the process. Now I'm doing a project in Jordan, and it's the same way. I ask for, okay, please, like, let me with the participants to see their possibilities, what they are able to give, what they are interested in. Then we see what I will use, what I will not use. So it's not like tool books, and let's apply it on this community. It's more really to be in the space, to have empathy more, to listen to the people, and to see if this is really good and bring something out for them or not. I'm also a researcher. So for me also, as a researcher, I co-research with the community. I have to come and to say clearly for people, I will do this for this and this and this. Is it okay for you? Will you be interested to be co-researchers with me or not? If yes, then we go ahead. So it's not about really me, myself. Yeah, thank you.
I think it's a very important question. And I'm not an artist. I'm a curator, so from the perspective of a curator, for me, and again, I'm not super in, and it's not that I focus on socially engaged art. That's not my practice. The experience that I've had with that, I would say that the answer is commitment and experience on the side of the artist. Quite cynically, I think I can say that right now we are past the first wave of hype of socially engaged art, because that's already gone. So luckily, we are no longer in a situation when every artist was trying to get involved with any community they saw and kind of put on a halo and save the world. So luckily, we're past that. And in Poland, as we talked about specific things. What I see is that the artists who stayed with socially engaged art or working with specific communities are the ones who actually work with very specific communities, and it's been going on for years. So I think for me, their commitment and their experience is something that I would rely on or would choose to trust. But when it comes to people who are just starting, like that's that's a big challenge and a big risk for everyone involved, and you have to be super careful also, like with whom you're starting to work, not in terms of artists, but and probably don't start with people who are struggling with addictions and and trauma and basically all these things, like and I think, luckily, I think we're past that. I mean, there is. I think one of the one of the way to represent that change is now we're having, as you know, probably like the situation of migrants on the Polish-Belarusian border is absolutely dramatic, and we're again is another migrant crisis. And I see very different responses from the artists and from the artistic field with the previous one that was like the big political storm. Because obviously the crisis is ongoing, but I'm talking about the ones that the politically hyped moments. Artists would try to do some works with them. It's like what everyone was going to the border, to the camps, and it was like what the hell, Right now. What artists are doing today that popped up, Honorata Martin and I think Pracownia Arbus, I think they're called. They're basically organizing an auction of art to give to activists who are actually helping the migrants at the border. And I think that's a much more responsible way of engaging art with the refugee crisis at the moment. Just, share resources, show solidarity in that way, and don't pretend you know how to help when you don't, right? So I think we're this is the example of how attitudes developed, and
I would add one thing. I think the starting point is not about I want to help or I want to change the world, actually, because for me it's not about help, actually. It's about I would love to work with people who are interested to work with me. Simple. And this is like even with refugees, with anyone, I start to feel also it's not about I want to go to work with refugees because they are refugees. If they are really interested to explore this possibility, yes, let's try, let's do something together. And also the other thing, mostly in Europe, it's become more the idea of if they are settled already, if they are already having some, because come on, there are priorities in life. Like you will not ask somebody who's still in temporary condition to come and do art and theater, and they don't know what will happen to them. They will be moved somewhere else to another town because they didn't have good marks or I don't know what. So it's all the time also to see the whole image. Yeah, thank you.
I would add two things. One of them is that I constantly question myself, but questioning is not the same as doubting. I think that questioning is very healthy and necessary, at least for me, to maintain my my reality check on why I'm doing what I'm doing, and yeah, what's my focus and what's the focus of the community, or what it's creating. And the other thing is to know your limits, because I think it's very important also to know how you are feeling. So when you go to a community and you want to work with them, it's very important for you to know what role you are taking and how far you can go or what you can help with. And helping not in a sense of, so I agree with you 100% in that. But you have to be aware of what kind of problems, issues, situations your work might raise. And you have to have a chain or a link of other sort of professionals, psychologists, social workers, whatever shall be needed in those situations, because there are things that are out of not even your comfort zone, but your zone of expertise. And it's your responsibility to be able to, not to solve those issues, but to be able to provide some guidance, like where you can go if my practice has opened some wounds or some things that I personally cannot close, and that maybe you cannot close on your own either. And the limits, I'm also understanding in them in a sense that I'm very clear, and this is also transparency, with the people I work with about my role and about our relationship. I see a lot of times that people working with communities are creating bonds and answering to calls and creating these, a lot of times, false relationships with people. And I don't say that it cannot be also true and that you cannot create bonds with the people you're working with, but I really want to be clear about what are my limits as a professional and what are the limits of our relationships, because it can hurt. Like, a process ends, and then will I be able to maintain my relationship with these 20 people, and then the next 20 I'm working with, and the next. It's just about human limits as well.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions here? Because we are getting close to the limit of our time. If not, then informally we can still continue. But I would like to thank you very much for joining. And then tomorrow we are also continuing a little bit. We will see the work of Fanny, what they did in the last 2 weeks and the years before. But I was very happy to welcome you here live in Budapest. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.